Crowhill here. Today we review a stout and discuss electric vehicle news. Hello and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Good evening, Pigweed.
Good evening, Crowhill.
What's on your mind?
Well, I drove a Tesla.
Mm.
Yes, my cousin has one.
Mm-hmm.
He leases it, and it's pretty sweet.
Yeah?
It's a nice, it's the features, the drive, it's all very, very, just a cool little, almost like, like a sports car feel. I mean,
I rode in one. I got an Uber, and the Uber driver had a Tesla.
Yeah, quiet.
And I don't. It was not a smooth ride, and I'm not sure if that was the driver's fault or the vehicle's fault. It was like kind of herky jerky a little bit. But anyway, so I mean, you had a really good experience.
Yeah.
So are you concerned about any of the downsides of having a EV?
There are so many downsides that I've noticed in the news lately.
Right.
That yes, for all my love for the vehicle, I could only see it as a second vehicle.
As a second vehicle, so sort of like having a motorcycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. A convertible is good for,
Sure.
the greatest thing you could have on a beautiful summer day.
But you're not going to drive it in the snow.
I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't see how it's going to, we're going to mandate replacing all vehicles with this. It's going to have some impact, and I think that's fine. But there's some downsides, and we've talked about potential downsides in the past.
Right.
Now I think we need to look at some recent news items and see
how that actually worked out. Yeah.
But not before.
Not before. Yeah, you have to get
The Viking
journey up north here. So I was thinking about doing a Russian Imperial Stout. And as I was building my recipe for it, I realized it's really not Russian because it's using English malt.
Yeah.
And it's using northern yeast. So I said it's really a Viking Imperial Stout.
Okie doke.
So that's what I went for. It's a Viking Imperial Stout. And it's chocolate malt, roasted barley, and
120.
yeah, and so it's pretty heavy. And I use the Kvik ale yeast, which is the one that comes from, Scandinavian navels or whatever the heck it is. And so there you go.
And there you go. And so Imperial implies a certain amount of oomph.
Yeah, and it has a lot of oomph on the flavor and malt side, but on the alcohol side, it didn't turn out to be anywhere near as strong as I expected. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the attenuation of the yeast or what it was.
I would say that the term Imperial would at least require an 8.
No, it's not 8.
No?
No.
All right.
Yeah, so it's maybe just a Viking Stout.
Well, it's lovely. The carbonation is just right.
Yeah. It's nice and black. Good carbonation. Very strong, stouty kind of a flavor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, because it does. I wouldn't be surprised if you called that an 8, but I'm not getting a lot of heat. But it seems so.
Based on the numbers,
full-bodied and mouthfeely. It tastes like an Imperial Stout, but you're saying it's less than 8?
Based on the numbers, it wasn't an 8. So I wish I could stick a little probe in there and find out.
Well, I would do that again with some
another yeast. Try to.
Do you think that the yeast didn't get it done, or do you think that you didn't get enough grains in there?
No, I think my original gravity was very high. The difference between the original and the final gravity wasn't big enough.
Oh, I see. Your final is 13.
My final gravity
you
was
want to be
still too high.
around 10 or below, right?
I wanted my final gravity lower, so it's possible.
I see. Maybe it's a yeast thing.
It's possible it's yeast, and it's possible I kegged it before it was done fermenting. But
out of fear of doing what we did with the other beer, which is going to go too long, so that it exhausts the yeast, and you don't get any carbonation in your beer.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, this is
that's
delicious.
all very nerdy.
Very nerdy, but this is delicious. I like it. I'm going to put it on my list of.
That's a keeper.
Put it on my list
with a modification.
Yeah, beers to do again.
So I don't know where these stories are.
So some of the stories, I was kind of surprised. Some of the stories turned out to be better than I expected them to be. Like for example.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about the danger of fires for EVs.
Yeah.
And it is a big problem because apparently they burn really hot and it's hard to put them out. so that the Tempe, Arizona Fire Department has come up with this new device, this fancy new device. They're the only fire department in the country that has this thing to try to deal with putting out a burning EV. Apparently, when an EV gets burning, it puts poisonous gases and it contaminate water sources. It's a really nasty thing.
And you see the firemen there just spraying a hose for an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And it's very, very hard to put them out. But the other side of the coin is even though they're a disaster when they do get burning, they're not as likely to burn as a gasoline power car.
Well, which I totally believe. I mean, if you forget about the entire 100 years of history, good. All right, let's do this. Let's take 20 gallons of gasoline. And you drive around with it.
Right.
Wow.
Kind of stupid.
Yeah. While it's burning the whole time. How's that?
Yeah.
So,
right. Let's just stick some dynamite in the trunk.
Might as well.
Yeah, right.
But, they are remarkably safe. However, yeah, it's right there.
Yes, it is a little crazy. Have you ever been by a fire car of fire? Right, close by when a car. I was in Texas, and there was this car on fire by the side of the road, and we drove way around it, 20 feet around it.
Yeah,
and you could feel the heat of that car. It was amazing how hot that thing was. It was crazy. But apparently EV fires are worse than that. And one of the big concerns is that when you dispose of these things and you have a bunch of EV cars like in a junkyard or something like that, if one of them catches on fire, man, you're in trouble.
Yeah. There's a pile of EV scooters in China that, just burn for days.
Right. And supposedly it's not just cars, it's scooters, it's even the batteries.
It might even be more so because if you're getting some cheap unknown scooter from some off-brand Chinese company, and then you've got it plugged into your basement, it's probably more dangerous than, a Tesla or something like that.
But apparently a lot of these lithium-ion batteries, even the ones you put in your drill and, lawnmowers, other kinds of things, they are a bit of a fire risk.
Yeah.
So it's not a good idea to bring those things in your house.
Well, how about this terrible story? So the guy in Florida who knows he's living in a hurricane zone properly builds his house on concrete stilts. Yeah. But of course, what do you do underneath? You park your car. That's fine. That makes sense. Place floods, doesn't get it to his house. Floods the car. But that's
something about water and EVs don't go well together.
And then so then you've done all the right things, and you start your car. The car catches on fire and burns your house down. Now and the guy's like, I did everything right.
As opposed to this other family that had some trouble charging their Tesla. So they took the battery out of the Tesla, brought it into their house, and tried to charge it inside their house, and their house burned down. Yeah. So there does seem to be an issue. We need to learn a little bit about this fire hazard.
The whole thing is this whole idea that we need to do it, and we need to do it now, and we need to do it fast. The gradual, every time you can take some electricity, we'll get into that. If you can take some pollution out of the air, all right, that's a good thing.
Sure.
If you can have a solar field, and that means you can now reduce your fossil fuel plant by 10% or whatever the equivalent is. As you increase this one, you can lower that one. All right, that seems good. Sure. But this idea that we're going to go headlong, balls out, into this world where we're going to save the environment and save ourselves some money. Oh, no. Nobody ever said we're going to save any money.
We're just going to mandate all this stuff because it's going to save the planet.
Right.
And this whole idea of the government setting these goals, you have to have this many EVs by a certain date and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really match with reality.
It doesn't match with reality. Just like, the miles per gallon mandates. Yeah. What level? Hold on. We'll get back to that. To what degree can the government tell an industry how to produce the product that the people already like and want.
Well, that we'll get back to that question of liking and wanting, but I wanted to talk about mining a little bit.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's keep it in America.
Okay.
And then we'll move. I'm sure. Is that an American?
Well, some of the mining's in America, but not a lot. So
this is a simple one here. When it got really, really cold in Chicago the other week. Yes, so there was just a line of people. This guy says, you have to come here, wait 2 hours to get into the charger. They tell you it's fast, but it's going to take 2 hours to charge your car. So there are all of these people lined up, but they're, it reduces the efficiency, it reduces
batteries don't work well in the cold.
And also, it's almost like, remember when VW was caught fudging its numbers for, that the range that they say that they have, that's fudged. But yeah, so again, like back to the convertible thing, it's a luxury.
Yeah. Okay, here you are, you're living in Florida, and you know that every once in a while there's going to be a hurricane coming in, and you're going to be called to evacuate. And you've got to get in your car and drive some number of hours out on the highway. You don't know how many hours, because you don't know how backed up you're going to be. You don't know what's going to happen. And there was actually some congressional testimony on this, where some congressmen from Florida were asking these people, okay, so what would happen if everybody's trying to evacuate Florida and they were all in EVs? Well, it'd just be a disaster, because they would get stuck. They wouldn't be able to go far enough on the range from an EV car.
Well, and they would have to. So I know a guy with a BMW EV, and what it does is it knows. They're so smart. So you're trying to get home. You let it know that you're trying to get home. It will start powering down things. So like you might
radio
lose,
turns off.
Yes, you lose your air conditioning.
Right. Yeah.
You lose your heating or whatever. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But you're not idling and burning gas. So if you're idling an electric car,
what if you need to have a
but
heater
you're not burning.
on?
But what I'm saying is, if you're stuck in an evacuation, what do you burn? You're not burning electricity just by sitting and not moving.
Right, but what if you're in a cold area of the country and you're stuck and you need to get the heat, then you really, so the idea of it has to do with the problem of range, and gasoline cars just have a way longer range than EVs.
I saw a picture of, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, and maybe not. It looked like it was mobile, but maybe it wasn't. It wasn't very big, but it was a giant diesel generator and an EV charging station.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So something so hilarious about the idea of saving the planet.
Right.
But what it does, it just brings home to the fact that that's mostly how it's going, except for that diesel generator is so far away you can't see it.
Yes.
Here it's sitting right next to the thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know what? Guess what, guys? This is basically where your electricity comes from.
I think people have this idea
zero emissions.
They have this idea they're going to have solar panels on their roof that's going to charge a battery that's going to charge their EV when they get home.
When that happens, you got something.
Yeah,
or the solar panel is just built into the roof of the vehicle.
Yeah, wouldn't that be lovely?
As you're driving around, it's just sucking up the sun and powering your vehicle.
I'm not sure that's even physically possible.
When that happens, I am 100% in. But I'm not so. In terms of also about getting where you get your juice from.
Yeah.
Here we had in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, a 4.4 megawatt solar field comprised of 14,000 solar panels was completely destroyed by hail.
Now, my big question about those, that's obviously a catastrophe, but the thing I always wonder about this is you build this big field of solar panels, and you've obviously chopped down a bunch of something to build it, right? And now you've got to control the weeds, and you've got to control the critters, right?
Yes.
So you're filling that field with pesticides and all this other kind of stuff going on. is any of that calculated into this environmental impact?
Yeah, or you're driving down the road and you see a field of cows, which are gross, who are destroying the planet, and their methane is everywhere, and meat is bad, and then you get to this disgusting field of solar panels. That's the beautiful one, and the cows in the pasture is makes you.
That's bad.
Yeah,
yeah.
that
It is a different attitude, isn't it? Kind of strange.
So it was $1 million worth of damage, and the farm was down for 6 months. So what I don't know about you, what I like about my energy is that it's cheap and reliable, and I'm not sensing that down 6 months and costing $1 million to repair the entire field that was devastated. They said, "Oh, they told us that it was hail resistant." Well, it's not hail proof, I guess.
Yeah, it resisted, just not very much. So yeah, what I want about my power is when I throw a switch, I want the light to come on. That's what I want.
You're weird that way.
Yeah. So the other thing about this stuff is it's really not good for the environment because the one downside of electric vehicles has to do with its effect on dirt. This is kind of weird, but the metals used to create electric vehicles release toxic chemicals into the soil, which are toxic to bacteria in the soil, which can mess up the soil. Because the soil is a very complicated thing. It's not just, you think of it as just dirt, whatever that, but it's got all these bacteria.
You're saying bacteria in a good way, or
bacteria in a good way
Okay.
in the dirt, and a lot of the toxins that are created by EVs. Okay, think of it this way. Remember back when we were kids, you had leaded gasoline, and there was a lot of lead, like on roads and next to roads, from the exhaust from cars. Because you'd be driving a car with leaded gasoline and it would be spewing out this lead, which was bad for stuff, and they decided to go to unleaded gasoline. Well, the thing with EVs is somewhat similar to that, in that the chemicals that are used for the batteries create these toxins that are going to get into the soil.
You mean when you dispose of them?
No. Apparently it just has to do, well, it has to do with
the
making of them and also just driving around with them. Yeah. So they're not as good for the environment as people think. You know, this idea that electric vehicles are green, well, no, because there's, how do you dispose of them? Are you able to recycle them? There's questions about that, and there's the question of getting the things to make them. So there's a lot of environmental problems, not just with getting the power to charge the electric vehicle, but even getting the materials to make them.
Yeah, I saw a meme with a bunch of greasy guys going, "This is how I get, the fuel for my diesel truck." Right. And then it showed Then it showed a bunch of African children digging in a mine, going, "And this is how you get your, this is how you get your battery for your EV."
Yeah.
So it's environmentally damaging. It's humanitarian.
Have you heard about
and they say the long term. So it costs. There's more carbon footprint in building an EV, but over the course of the lifetime of the
that's what they
EV,
say, right? Yeah,
that's what they say. But But even if
what about disposal?
Even if what about disposal? And what if you're getting all of your juice, from a coal plant?
Right.
Are you calculating that if you get all of your juice from ferry farts and wind tunnels?
Yeah. Right. I mean, if it was all nuclear, that would be nice.
Well.
Yeah, so what you were saying about how somebody gets their diesel fuel reminded me, have you heard about the guys who go to restaurants and collect the grease from restaurants and make diesel fuel out of the grease?
And the exhaust smells like French fries?
Yes. So they'll go to some restaurant and they'll collect the nasty garbage that comes out of the restaurant, and they'll use that. They'll have some process where they'll go home and turn that into diesel fuel and then run their car on it.
I love it.
Yeah, but it does smell like French fries when it's driving around. Yeah.
So I got this other news item here, and this is just from a few weeks ago. It said safety experts were grappling with an array of infrastructure burdens and dangers associated with electric vehicles. Well, what could they be? Which can weigh up to 50% more than traditional automobiles thanks to their heavy lithium-ion batteries.
How many driveways are going to start cracking because people have electric vehicles?
Roads, bridges, parking garages, right? All of these things are built with a certain safety rating, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
the engineering,
Parking garages.
Engineering is like,
that.
okay, so the average car weighs... You didn't calculate that the average car was going to weigh 50% more.
Yeah.
Highway safety guardrails.
Sure.
Okay, they run tests on these things. They know how strong these things need to be. The danger to pedestrians and bicyclists. What about the danger to hitting a car? If a 3,000-pound car hits a 1,000-pound car, okay, there's that. And
so this is something.
4,500. Well, this
is something that there's a big problem in the car world in general. Is that people who drive little cars are more environmentally safe. They get more miles per gallon and all that kind of stuff, but they're littler. So if you get in a car wreck, if you in your little Hyundai Accent run into a Ford F-150, you're going to be messed up, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people feel like they want a bigger car to feel safer. This becomes a spiraling thing. And as there are more EVs on the road, which are way heavier than regular cars, it's going to spiral again. So
as we also encourage gas-powered cars to be lighter to improve their gas mileage, because there's the pressure on that end.
Yes.
Then you get greater disparity, and now every accident is
the thing that amazes me about all this is it's like they never talk to an engineer, because the thing you mentioned about parking garages, I was just thinking about that. Yeah, you're right. Obviously, they figured out how much does this level of the parking garage have to support.
Right. If
all of a sudden the cars are 50% heavier, you're going to have parking garages collapsing.
Yeah.
Because
and just how about how long asphalt on a bridge holds up?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So this is why I hate politicians trying to solve these things. Did they ever ask the engineers? Did they ever get any data? Did they ever find out what's actually happening?
We have to do something.
Yeah, right. And it doesn't make any sense.
Toyota never really got on board.
Okay.
So while other people were, especially, I think after we talked about the VW, after they got their nose rubbed in it, they're like, all right, we have a commitment that by 20 whatever, we're going to be all electric.
Yeah.
So you've got government pressure, you've got government penalties, and you also have the feel-good approach, and you have the anticipation of what is the future.
Yeah.
Right. So Toyota's like, this ain't the future. They said they don't think that the calculation that they made was that EVs would account for about 30% of car sales by the end of the decade, far short of the government's goal of about 60%.
Yeah.
Really, the government really thinks that we're going to get to 60%.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you will if the government, and then in California, just says you're not allowed to sell anything else after so and so date.
Well, you know what people are just going to do something else. They're going to buy cars overseas and have them shipped or something.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that politicians never realize. If you swing at somebody, they duck.
Yeah.
People, if you tried, you have two states. You have state A and you have state B. And state A says, we're going to have a business tax of 20%. And state B says, we're going to have a business tax of 10%. You know what happens? The businesses all move.
And like, wait a minute, we've done all our calculations based on all the businesses staying here, and our whole budget is based on the 20% thing that we told you we were going to be able to pay for everything.
Right.
And now what happens?
And now they all move, right? The same thing, every time you have this sort of a government mandate where they come along and say, we're going to force you to do this, people find ways around it.
Yes.
Yes. And the other thing is, electric vehicles simply aren't catching on. There's been a lot of early adoption.
Yes, and you always when some new technology comes out, there are the nerds out there that can't wait, and they'll pay anything to be on that.
Yes.
And then the dumb politicians extrapolate that out to, Soon everybody will be on board.
Yeah, and the fact is, if you look at the numbers, we are not on track to meet the government projections. You have Ford and GM are slowing production. You have, so here's this quote. The entire myth at the heart of this whole transition is that the battery car seamlessly fits right into the gas car's position.
Mm-hmm.
But that's completely not true. There's no charging infrastructure like there is gasoline stations. You don't have a charging infrastructure. When you do have a charge, it can take a long time to charge. Home charging is not available to people who don't have a garage, right? If you live in an apartment or something. There's anxiety about how far the car can go. People like bigger cars. EVs are more expensive, although some people say the long-term cost of an EV is lower. That may be true, but the initial sticker shock is hard. And then there's the question where we talked before, you know, if you're stuck on the road for a long period of time, what do you do? So the EVs, there was an initial, you know, people who were thrilled about it, bought them, but the demand has dropped off substantially. And a lot of companies are cutting back because they're just not seeing the...
Yeah, Volvo is out. Ford is cutting back after their, you know, the F-150, the most popular vehicle for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. They introduced the $100,000 electric version of it, and guess what? Not as many people want to buy them as you thought. So,
right.
So again, so back to the government command economy.
Right.
How much can you force a company to make what the government thinks that you should make? And what happens when you're about to put them out of business? Are you just going to keep subsidizing them until, yeah, I know that you're losing $10,000 a car. We're going to give anybody who wants one, the rich people who can afford a $60,000 car, we're going to give them $20,000 so they don't have to buy an $80,000 car.
Yeah, the thing that I don't like about central planning is that markets have an intelligence of their own that some bunch of geniuses sitting around a table are not going to know. Who could have predicted the kinds of things that are going on? Like, who could have predicted 2 years ago the influence that ChatGPT would have?
Yeah.
Nobody. There are things that happen in the market that people just simply can't plan for. And the idea that, you know, Hillary Clinton and Bill Gates and a bunch of smart people are going to sit around a table and figure out, oh, this is what we should do. Yeah. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. Because the way things actually work out in reality is never the way the geniuses plan it.
So nudging things in this direction is good. It's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'd love to have one. I've replaced my lawnmower and my weed whacker, mm-hmm. and I love that. When spring comes around, guess what happens? You plug it in, and they work. Right. So that's great. So yeah, but you know, go all right. We're gonna 2035.
We know how it's all going to work. Yeah, there's such an arrogance to it that we are smarter than the market. I have a friend who likes to say, all of us are smarter than a few of us.
Yeah, fair.
And the
wisdom of the masses.
Wisdom of the masses, that sort of thing. And there's this arrogance to politicians and to government that they think, no, their little committee is going to figure everything out. Remember Hillary with healthcare? She figured everything out, you know? And that's the same kind of thing that I'm seeing with these EVs. I'm fine with EVs. Great. If you want to make them, make them. But let's let them compete in an open market, in an open environment, and let the best technology win.
So when, you know, for the, you don't, I thought we've established that the government shouldn't pick winners and losers. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But let's just say Freon and the hole in the ozone and aerosol sprays.
Right.
Right. So now we've got some serious environmental threat, supposedly. Mm-hmm. And so the government steps in order to mitigate that threat. Mm-hmm. All right. Is that legit, or how? And how is that any different than saying global warming is an existential threat, and it's all caused by CO2, and so we're going to mandate that there's less CO2 in the air.
What was that thing that everybody was afraid of in coffee filters? Do you remember that? Do you remember that thing? I don't remember
love the sound of it.
There was this chemical that everybody was afraid of that was like in your coffee filter. And so in some cases they get it right. You know, okay, we needed to get off of Freon, so they switched to another
Teflon pans.
Yeah.
Or something
So,
like that.
okay, that's fine. They get some things right from time to time, and they get some things wrong from time to time. I get that. That's just the nature of humanity. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, we're figuring it out.
Yeah, but the idea that you're going to predict the future and mandate things in a certain direction, I just can't sit with that.
Especially in a capitalist society where you can't mandate a company to lose money.
Right.
All right, you say you have to make these vehicles, and they can only cost $50,000. And you said, but Mr. Government, they cost me $70,000 to make.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't matter because our lives are at stake.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I obviously can't do that.
Yeah. Well, that's
one of the limits
whole,
for
that. Okay, you brought up the issue that is at the heart of all this, which is the crisis part of it. Is humanity's at stake, the world is at stake, the earth is going to burn, all this crazy...
Who cares if you're losing $10,000 a car?
I know. This apocalyptic kind of stuff, it's almost cultish.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you know, the world is going to burn in 5 years. We have to make these radical changes, and who cares if we haven't thought about whether the EVs are going to be too heavy and make all the garages collapse, right? You know, that kind of crazy thinking, this extreme thinking, this emergency thinking is not a good idea. I mean, unless it's a real emergency, which I just don't believe that it is, you know.
Well, yeah. Have you talked to my friend John Kerry lately?
I have not. He's not returning my calls.
How about Greta?
Greta, yeah.
Right.
She's on my speed dial.
Exactly. So obviously, the government can't come in and say only 30% of the pants that this company makes can be made of jeans and the rest have to be out of polyester, or only 30% is 22% of toothpaste has to be this flavor, right? So how does the government get away with dictating what a private company is allowed to produce?
You know, okay, here's my cynical response to that. The reason the government gets away with doing that kind of stuff is because the companies that are benefiting from that mandate are paying the politicians to support that policy. That's what we've seen with the COVID nonsense, with vaccines, with everything else, is they're getting kickbacks, they're getting
so they're being assured that even if I lose $10,000 per vehicle, I won't actually lose $10,000, right? Because I'll be getting it from the taxpayer. Is that right? Yes. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll make those.
Exactly.
I mean, it would have to be that way, right?
That's what's happening.
Well, that's a cynical view, my friend.
It is a cynical view, but you know, the more I see what's actually going on in the world, the more cynical I get.
Yeah. So it's not your fault; it's theirs. You're the victim here.
I'm the victim. You know, okay, if you want to write to the show, pigweedshow@gmail.com. We get some good questions from time to time.
All right, so I got this is a quickie here. Goodbye Kitty has some corrections for us. Pigweed was unsure how to pronounce Barry Weiss's first name. Yeah. It's Barry, not Barry. And neither of you could remember the name of the car in Dukes of Hazzard. It's the General Lee.
Of course it's the General Lee.
Jeez, yes. How did I get stuck on the old General Lee? And I'm not even sure. Oh, I know. This was the Flovid show.
Yes.
Where, yes, because of the stars and bars on the car and the name of the General Lee.
That show got canceled.
It had to be removed.
From polite society.
Only until people calmed down.
That was such a great show.
I'm sure you can
watched
find
that
it.
show.
You couldn't watch cops for a while.
Yeah.
You couldn't watch while Flovid was coursing through the veins of America.
Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm.
Boss Hog.
Boss Hog, yes, that was a great show. And Daisy Duke.
You know, I mean, I even asked my son. So young people still call them Daisy Dukes without understanding the origin.
Idea what
and
that means.
Do you know where that comes? And I think the show came on. I was like, do you know what Daisy Dukes are? He says, yeah. I said, that's Daisy Duke. That's where it comes from. Yes, son. There's a lot to be learned.
Yes.
Man.
All right. Okay.
All righty. Well, you know what? When I get a $100,000 allowance for my next vehicle, I'm going to get a pickup truck for every day and a Tesla just for fun.
Just for fun.
But
all right.
until then.
Until then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Maybe not. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.